The distress signal had been screaming into the void for 11 days before anyone answered. Ambassador Vex Th'ollan of the Cerulean Compact floated in the shattered observation dome of her dying flagship, watching the last thread of atmosphere hiss out into the dark, and she did the only thing left to a diplomat with no more cards to play. She laughed, not from madness, though madness was close enough to taste, but from the bitter, aching irony of it. Every civilized species in the charted spiral had ignored her call. The Krythan Ascendancy had cited jurisdictional complications. The Ilmar Concord had promised aid, pending council review, a review that would take longer than her remaining oxygen. Even her own people, drowning in their bureaucratic wars back home, had gone silent. And then, on the 12th day, when she had already begun composing her final message to a daughter who would never receive it, a signal cut through the static, not encrypted, not filtered through 17 layers of protocol, just a voice, rough, human, immediate. Unknown vessel, this is the UNS Kestrel Dawn. We hear you, we're coming, hold on. She would remember those 4 words for the rest of her life. We hear you. Coming, but none of this had begun that way. 3 days earlier, the Kestrel Dawn had been drifting through the Threnody Reach on what should have been a routine deep space survey. The kind of assignment Captain Elena Reyes had specifically requested because nothing ever happened out here. 6 months into an 18-month deployment, her crew of 42 needed boredom, the way lungs need air after a battle. The Reach was empty, charted, safe, which was precisely why the alarm that woke her at 0300 ship time felt so wrong. Captain, you need to see this. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb's voice crackled through her cabin comm, tight with the particular calm he only used when things were bad. Reyes was on the bridge in 90 seconds, hair still damp from sleep, boots half-laced. Talk to me, distress beacon, non-human signature. The translation matrix is choking on it, but the emergency frequency is universal enough. Signal's old, Captain. Really old. Whoever sent it, they've been broadcasting for over a week. Reyes leaned over the tactical display, watching the crimson pulse blink against a field of stars. Location? That's the problem. Webb's jaw tightened. It's coming from the hollow, the debris field nobody's mapped past the outer edge. Command flagged it as a graveyard sector 11 years ago. Too much wreckage, too much radiation, no reason to go in. Ensign Priya Nadkarni, barely 2 years out of the academy, spoke up from the sensor station without turning around. Captain, whatever's out there has been dying alone for 11 days. If we don't go, nobody will. The bridge went quiet. Reyes had heard the arguments against unnecessary risk 100 times in her career, from admirals, from politicians, from the cold calculus of cost-benefit analyses that treated a single distant life as a rounding error. She had never agreed with any of them. Helm, plot a course into the hollow. Webb, get engineering ready for radiation exposure. Nadkarni, keep that signal locked. I want to know the second it changes. She straightened, feeling the old certainty settle into her spine like armor. Nobody gets left behind. Not on our watch. Not ever. The Kestrel Dawn turned its nose toward the graveyard of forgotten ships and dove in. The truth stunned even Reyes when they found it. What the charts called a debris field was in fact the wreckage of an entire war. Hundreds of vessels from a dozen different species, locked in a silent tomb of twisted alloy and frozen fire, the aftermath of a conflict so old that even the metal had begun to forget it. Radiation crackled off ruptured reactor cores. Ghost signals, automated distress calls from ships centuries dead, clogged every channel like static from the grave. And somewhere in the middle of it, one signal was still alive. They found the compact vessel wedged between the ribs of 2 derelict warships. Its hull cracked open like an egg, life support flickering on borrowed time. When the Kestrel Dawn's shuttle finally breached the wreck's airlock, Reyes led the boarding party herself, helmet sealed, sidearm holstered but ready, heart hammering with the particular dread of not knowing what she'd find. What she found was Ambassador Vex Th'ollan, barely conscious, her 4-fingered hand still pressed against the control panel. She no longer had the strength to operate, having spent her last reserves of power keeping the beacon alive instead of the heating system. She had chosen, in her final hours, to make sure someone could find her rather than to be comfortable while she waited to die. You came, Vex rasped, her translator crackling with damage. Nobody came. For 11 days. Nobody came. We're here now, Reyes said, kneeling beside her, already signaling for the medical team. You're safe. Vex's dark eyes, too large, too alien, and yet unmistakably full of disbelief, fixed on the human woman's face. Why? You do not know me. Your species owes my people nothing. We have never even made formal contact. Reyes almost smiled, though there was nothing funny in it. Does it matter? That question would echo through Vex Th'ollan's mind for the rest of the voyage home, and long after. Nobody knew what the human ship was truly carrying until the medical bay debrief 3 hours later. When Vex, stabilized, stitched together by technology cruder than her own, but applied with a gentleness she hadn't expected, finally told them what she'd been running from. The Hollow is not simply a graveyard, she said, her voice steadier now. 11 days ago my convoy was ambushed, not by pirates, not by rivals in trade disputes, by the Marrow Concord, a faction within my own government's military that decided diplomacy with outsiders was treason. Her hands trembled, not from injury but from the memory. I was carrying evidence, proof of corruption reaching into the highest levels of the Compact Council. They didn't want me reaching a hearing. They wanted me erased, quietly, in a sector no one would ever search. Webb, standing near the door with arms crossed, exchanged a glance with Reyes. And now that we've found you, they'll come looking. Yes. Vex met his gaze without flinching, an unfamiliar steel entering her voice despite her exhaustion. And when they do, they will not hesitate to destroy this ship along with me, simply to erase the evidence. And to erase the fact that outsiders were involved. The Council had made a terrible mistake believing Vex would die quietly. But that mistake was about to become the Kestrel Dawn's problem too. Reyes didn't need long to decide. Then we don't sit still and wait for them. Captain, Webb said carefully, with respect, we're a survey vessel, light armor, minimal weapons. If the Marrow Concord sends anything serious, I know what we are, Commander. Reyes's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the room go silent. We're the ship that came when nobody else would. That doesn't stop being true just because it gets harder. The Marrow Concord found them 9 hours later. 3 warships dropped out of transit space directly ahead of the Kestrel Dawn's projected course, sleek, black, bristling with weapons clearly designed for a war. Their masters had never officially declared. Their lead vessel hailed immediately, and the being that appeared on the viewscreen wore the insignia of a compact fleet commander, though his eyes carried none of the diplomatic warmth Vex had shown. Human vessel, the commander said, his translated voice flat with contempt, you are harboring a fugitive of the Cerulean Compact. Surrender the traitor Th'ollan immediately, and you will be permitted to continue unharmed. Refuse, and you will be classified as a hostile combatant. Everything changed in the next few seconds. Reyes stood from her command chair, and for the first time since the crisis began, Vex saw something in the human captain's expression that startled her more than any weapon. Absolute, unshakable calm. This is Captain Elena Reyes of the United Nations ship Kestrel Dawn, she said. Ambassador Th'ollan is under our protection. She carries evidence of crimes against your own government's Oversight Council, and she has requested asylum, which, under the Interstellar Sanctuary Accords your government itself ratified 8 years ago, we are legally and morally obligated to honor. The commander's mouth curled. You would risk your ship, your crew, for one alien you have known for less than a day? We didn't ask how long we'd known her before we answered her distress call, Reyes said. We're not going to start asking now. The channel went dead. 30 seconds later, the 3 warships opened fire. What followed was not the kind of battle that would be remembered for its scale. It was a small, desperate, brutal fight in the dark. 3 heavily armed cruisers against a single survey vessel, with light armor and a crew never trained for war. And yet it became, in the months that followed, one of the most retold engagements in compact military history, because of what the Kestrel Dawn's crew chose to do with what little they had. Nad Carney rerouted power from every non-essential system to shields, buying seconds that mattered. Webb, coordinating from engineering, guided the ship through the wreckage of the hollow itself, using the ancient graveyard of dead warships as cover, weaving between hulks with a precision that made the pursuing cruisers hesitate for fear of their own destruction. And Reyes, hands steady on the helm controls she hadn't touched personally in years, threaded her ship through gaps a computer would have called impossible. Trusting instinct, sharpened over 2 decades of service, it was Vex, still bandaged, still weak, who provided the turn nobody expected. Dragging herself to the auxiliary console, she overrode the encryption on her own damaged ship's black box. The very evidence the Marrow Concord had killed to destroy, and broadcasted across every open channel in the sector, encrypted with a compact diplomatic seal that could not be faked or suppressed. "They're not just trying to kill me anymore," she gasped, breathless, as alarms wailed around her. "Now the whole compact will see what they did, and why." The lead cruiser's captain, realizing the evidence was already loose across 100 relay stations, made his decision in the space of a heartbeat: destroy the human ship anyway, and hope the chaos bought enough time to control the narrative. He never got the chance. The Queen, for that was what the Compact's ruling monarch was called, though she held that title in ceremony more than in law, had been watching the entire exchange unfold from a listening post 3 systems away, patched in through Vex's own emergency channel the moment it activated. Queen Isarith Volkai of the Cerulean Compact had spent 6 years suspecting corruption within her own military high command, and had lacked the proof to move against it. Now that proof was arriving in real time, broadcast by a woman she'd believed dead, the Queen suddenly froze. Not from fear, but from the particular fury of watching loyal servants murdered by their own government, while strangers risked everything to save them. "Patch me into that battle," she ordered. "Now." Her voice cut across every channel in the sector seconds before the Marrow cruisers could fire their killing volley, a direct, unambiguous, unforgeable command from the sovereign of the Cerulean Compact herself, ordering the immediate stand-down of all 3 vessels and their surrender for treason. 2 of the 3 ships complied instantly, their crews unwilling to die for a conspiracy that had just been exposed to their own monarch. The third, the commander who had first hailed the Kestrel Dawn, made one last, desperate attempt to fire anyway. It was Reyes who put the Kestrel Dawn between that final shot and Vex's shuttle bay, absorbing the blast across her ship's forward shields rather than let it reach its target. The hull screamed. Lights flickered. Somewhere below decks, a hull breach klaxon began to wail. But the ship held, and the shot that should have ended everything instead scattered harmlessly into the dark. The commander's own crew, watching their captain choose treason over surrender even after their queen's direct order, mutinied within the minute. The aftermath took longer to settle than the battle itself. Cerulean Compact investigators, genuine ones, this time, arrived within 2 days to take custody of the surviving conspirators, along with statements, evidence, and Ambassador Th'ollan herself, who insisted on remaining aboard the Kestrel Dawn until she was strong enough to stand on her own. On her final night aboard, Vex found Captain Reyes alone on the observation deck, watching the stars that had once seemed so indifferent to her survival. "I have represented my people in negotiations with 14 species," Vex said quietly, settling beside her. "I have studied diplomacy for most of my life. I thought I understood why civilizations help one another. Treaties, trade, mutual advantage, the careful architecture of alliance." She paused. "I did not understand until now that some species simply answer because someone is calling, and that is reason enough." Reyes considered that for a long moment. "We don't always get it right. We've made plenty of mistakes, plenty of wars we're not proud of. But somewhere along the way, we decided that if someone's drowning, you don't ask what they're worth before you throw the rope. That is a rare philosophy among the stars, Captain." "Maybe," Reyes said. "But it's ours, and we're not planning on changing it." Vex looked out at the vast dark that had so nearly swallowed her whole, and for the first time in 11 long silent days, she did not feel small within it. Word of the Kestrel Dawn's actions spread through the Cerulean Compact and beyond within weeks, not as a tale of overwhelming force or superior technology, but as something rarer and, to many alien ears, far more unsettling. Proof that an entire species could look at a stranger's cry for help, calculate nothing, and simply come. Humanity, the reports would later say, had no fleet vast enough to conquer the stars, no weapon terrible enough to be feared by empires. What it had instead was harder to defend against and impossible to ignore: the stubborn, unshakable habit of showing up. And in council chambers across a dozen worlds, diplomats who had never once considered humanity worth their attention began, quietly, to wonder what kind of species answers a call for help before it even asks who is calling. The answer, as the Kestrel Dawn had already proven, was simple: we hear you. We're coming.